I'm not ashamed to say that I am homeless. My parents had more kids than they could handle. My dad liked to drink more than he liked to work, and despite my mom's best efforts, she couldn't keep us together. Their fights had gotten pretty loud, and most of my older siblings had agreed that it was only a matter of time before CPS came to check on the 5 of us. I was the middle child, 16 years old, with no car and nothing but mediocre grades. When my older brother decided he was going to leave to get a job somewhere else, I begged him to take me with him. I rode with him for a little while. We made it all the way to Arizona, but he left me, just kind of left one day. I guess he got tired of hauling around a kid who wasn't even out of high school. That's when I started living on my own. I would travel from place to place, looking for day labor, work, or seeing who would hire a kid without any paperwork for a couple of weeks. Sometimes I would travel with people. Sometimes I'd just be traveling on my own, but eventually I got enough work that I had a crappy little car and enough gas to get me to next week's job site. I would stay at farms for a couple of months and help them pick corn or apples or whatever they needed. I would work at carnivals sometimes because they really didn't care about things like resumes or birth certificates or social security cards. I would work at scrap yards and at distribution plants, at warehouses and train yards, and it was honestly some of my favorite times. I was hungry sometimes. It was cold sometimes. Sometimes I had to leave my car and come back later when I had gas, but it was like I was on an adventure. I was constantly moving from this place or that place, and it was like I was a traveler in a fantasy book who was just trying to get to the next spot. Sometimes, if I was close enough to one of them not to go out of my way, I would stop over at a tent city and stay for a little bit. Tent cities aren't what we call them. We always call them by different names, depending on where they were, but that's what normal people and police call them. When a bunch of homeless people get together and set up lodging, it's usually old camper trailers and tents and tarps and all kinds of stuff, and eventually it looks like a flea market and a carnival had a baby that was addicted to meth. There were usually people selling food, people selling things, sometimes people selling people, and it was a good place to go if you knew people. Some other roaming people would go and meet up there. You'd see people there that you hadn't seen in years, but it was dangerous too. You could get robbed there real easy, and more than one person is buried in the ditches behind those tent towns. The first time I went to one of those cities, I was 23 years old, and I'd gone with some people I'd met on the road. We met at a rest stop, and they told me they were going to Tarp Town. I didn't know where that was, but I thought it sounded pretty cool. I was working on a little bit of a drug habit at that point, and they said they knew a guy who could get me some skag for cheap. I followed him there, and it was just about the craziest place I'd ever seen. They told me to be sure I locked my doors and to leave everything I didn't want stolen in the trunk. People had been known to have their windows broken at Tarp Town, and if it wasn't secured in the trunk or secured in my backpack, it was very likely that I was going to come back to broken glass and a missing radio. I was sitting at somebody's tent with a bowl of soup that I was trying to convince myself was beef when I saw the people in the black vans approaching. That was also the first time I had seen them. The people of Tarp Town seemed to tense like a bowstring when they saw the vans. They probably thought they were police or maybe that they were immigration or something, but what got out were these guys in black suits and fake smiling faces. They looked too pale to be out in the sun. Their clothes looked too clean to be in town, and their shoes looked like they'd be burning them whenever they got back from here. One of them, a red-haired woman with a very bright smile that did not go all the way to her eyes, stepped up and asked if anyone would like to make some money. "We're paying interested parties $2,000 for a job we need done. You will receive the money right now, and we'll be back to pick you up in the morning. The contract is non-negotiable, and if you take the money, attendance is mandatory." Someone jokingly asked her what would happen if they took the money and skipped town, and winced as her smile got a little bigger. Like I said, once you take the money, attendance is mandatory. We will find you, and we will get what we paid for. I started to get up. $2,000 was a lot of money, and my car had been making a weird noise for about a week now. But one of the guys I was sitting with pulled me back down and shook his head at me. I asked him what the hell he thought he was doing, and he told me it wasn't the kind of job that I wanted. They come around here about once every 2 or 3 months. None of the people they take are ever seen again, and I don't think they live long enough to spend that money. I don't know what they do to them, but unless you want to find out, I'd stay put right where you are. Some people decided that the money was worth it, and I saw about 20 people line up and sign off on some kind of contract. The people in the van had set up a little table not far from their vehicle, and the guys they had guarding them were set up with little submachine guns on straps. These guys were clearly not playing around, and the next morning I saw a line of people piling into the vans to go off to whatever the contract entailed. The men in the suits went into the camp and dragged out a few more, and then the men and women in the vans drove off, back the way they had come. Whether they ever found the others or not, I don't know, but I assume they got the people they were paid for. I asked some of the people of Tarp Town about the people in the black vans, and most of them were more than happy to talk about them. They came every 2 or 3 months. They always offered what sounded like a massive amount of money to homeless people, and then the people got in the vans the next morning, and they were never seen again. Some of the people who lived here said that they'd been all over the United States, and the people that got in those vans weren't seen at any other tent cities or anywhere else ever again. They supposed the people might have taken them overseas, but it seemed unlikely. Most of them figured the people who were dumb enough to take their money got roped into medical experiments, or maybe something even worse. Drug trafficking or slavery were never quite off the table, but those were just theories, and no one ever saw them again to ask what had happened. I didn't get some idea about what they did to them until 10 years later. 10 years is a long time to live out on the street, and I'd definitely been living a little worse than some people. My drug habit had gotten a little out of control, and I owed some people money that I really didn't want to pay them. Problem was, these were the kind of people that didn't take no for an answer, and they'd sell whatever part of you had to get said money if they had to. I was at a different tent city. This one was called the Wharf, and I'd seen some of the guys that I owed money to coming in later that evening after I arrived. They were clearly looking for me, not much was obvious, but just as the sun began to set, I saw the people in the black vans come rolling up again. I hadn't seen the van people in close to 5 years, but I began to think now that they might be the answer to my prayers. I could give the people I owed money to the money that the van people would give me. After that, I could just disappear if I needed to. Sounded like a good plan, at least it did to someone who was strung out on dope, and when they pulled up and started offering people $3,000 to come with them, I got in line. The offer had increased since the last time I'd seen them, and no matter what I asked, the lady sitting behind the little desk just kept smiling at me and telling me that if I wanted the money, I'd have to sign the contract. The contract was vague, not like I could have understood anything they were talking about anyway. There was a lot of technical jargon, a lot of flowery words, and in the end, I signed it and got the money. I paid off the people that I owed and took some of it and went to drinking at this little outdoor bar they'd set up in the tent town. It was a hole-in-the-wall place that sold rot-gut whiskey and homemade spirits. By the time a couple of guys grabbed me under the arms, I was too drunk and too done to do much but grunt at them. They put me in the back of the van along with a bunch of other people, and I slept most of the way to our destination. I woke up very suddenly, and I was lying flat on my back on a concrete floor without any clothes on. There were other people around me, people who looked scared or looked angry. They were all naked. All of them had been shaved bald. I saw that I was no exception. They'd gotten all my body hair, even my eyebrows. I asked the guy standing next to me what was going on, and he told me he didn't know. Apparently everyone had just woken up like this. They must have drugged us when we got in the back of the van. I'd clearly been too drunk to need much drugging, and we all stood around grumbling as a door suddenly opened. A very bright light showed us the way. Someone on the other side told us to come through, and most of the people lined up as they prepared to enter whatever was on the other side. I did the same. I didn't know what was going on, but I didn't want to miss out because I was still groggy. A couple of the people had a few things to say about it, most of them not so nice, and some of the guys in riot gear came in and pushed them into another door as they tried to fight them. These were the kinds of guys that you didn't fight. They looked like jail guards, as tall as they were wide, and they bullied them into a separate room, and we never saw them again. Those of us who went through the other door, the ones who lined up to get in, found ourselves in a sterile place that looked a lot like a doctor's office. We were sat down, given gowns to wear, given a meal of soup and a sandwich, and, well, then the tests began. They took our blood, they scraped our skin, they took hair follicles from the scalp, they weighed us, measured our weight, asked us all kinds of questions, and then some of us were taken out, and others of us were left in the room with some chairs. I was left behind, one of about 25, and then more tests began. They put us on treadmills, they gave us breathing machines to test our lung function, they tested our vision, tested our reflexes, asked us all kinds of other questions that were less medical and more educational. The lady who asked me questions wanted to know if I knew the capital of this state or that state, if I remembered any of the periodic table, if I knew who had been involved in this war or that war, and about 100 other things. I asked her a couple of times what all this meant, but she just said it was part of the process. After 4 hours, I started to think I might have made a mistake. The groups got smaller and smaller, some of us being pushed this way and some of us being pushed other ways. I had never really been in a position to study much, but when I was a kid, I had been a sieve for information. I was probably smarter than a lot of these guys they had brought in with me, and before long my group consisted of me and 3 others. I say guys, one of them was a woman, but that hardly mattered to the people testing us. All the people testing us wore these things that I now think of as clean suits. It was the kind of thing that doctors wear when they're worried about contaminating an operating site. They had masks and hairnets and goggles and gloves, and you really couldn't tell who they were. Eventually, I must have made it pretty far in because the questions started getting harder. I still believed this was all some kind of medical test or something, but then I got a peek behind the curtain. After about 8 hours of questions and tests and everything else, I was put in a small white room with a fellow in a clean suit who looked to be a little overweight. He was a big guy, he wore glasses, and that was about all I could tell about him. He started asking me questions, just like the rest of them, but by the way he was squirming, I could tell he really needed to go to the bathroom. He was fidgeting around in his chair like a little kid, rushing through the questions as he tried to get it done, and I finally told him if he needed to pee, then just go do it. Watching him dance around was making me crazy. He jumped up, almost thankfully, and told me to stay put, and that he'd be right back. I saw him use a key card to get out of the door, something the rest of them had done too, but in his haste to get out of there, he dropped it and just kept going. I picked it up, keyed the door, and stuck my head out into the hall to see exactly where I was. The guy who had left went racing down the hall, his little booties making a weird squishing sound on the tiles. And as he went to the bathroom, I went and did a little exploring. I could see other rooms with other people in them, people answering questions just like me, but When I went into a room a little farther down the hall, it turned out to be something like a locker room. There were lockers full of those clean suits, and I decided to put one of them on and maybe get the hell out of here. They had already paid me, I'd answered all their questions, and now I felt like it might be time for me to get going. This whole place was giving me a weird feeling, and the longer I stayed here, the more I wanted to get the hell out. Dressed in my clean suit, you couldn't have told me apart from anyone else. And as I made my way through the halls with my stolen keycard, I started hurrying a little before the guy came back and discovered I was gone. I kept putting my card on doors, heading down the corridor at random, and when I finally came out onto something like a factory floor, I saw what they had intended to do with all that data. If the front of the house area was a testing area, then the back was a mess of machines and hooks and conveyor belts. They were stripping the people down like cars in a chop shop. Nothing was wasted. They were harvesting the organs. They were taking their eyes. They were taking their minds. They were taking anything they could feasibly be useful. They weren't done, though. The bodies, once they were stripped of whatever they were using them for, were ground up, and the meat was taken elsewhere. I don't know where the meat was taken and what they were doing with it, but everything usable was put into coolers and shipping containers and seemed to be sent elsewhere. There were people in clean suits on the floor managing this and managing that, and I couldn't imagine watching people being deconstructed like that day in and day out. They were treating it as if there was nothing going on, just a typical Tuesday, and I was suddenly very sure that I needed to leave before they realized I wasn't one of them. I made it most of the way across the floor before the alarms started going off. The people in the clean suits headed back the way that I had come, heading towards the front half so that they could determine what was going on with the alarms. I made my way off the factory floor, and when I crossed back into the real world, it felt like escape was possible. There was a large area outside the factory full of trucks and containers and people just waiting to take what they were given somewhere else. I snuck onto one of those trucks somehow and rode on it for nearly 8 hours. It was hot, I was thirsty, but I just kept telling myself that I had to escape so I could tell people what I had seen. I wasn't thinking about the news or about talking to anybody important. I just knew that I had to tell the people in the tent cities what I had seen so that none of them would fall for this kind of thing again. Some of my friends were in a lot of trouble, and I had to be the one to break the news. When the truck stopped at a rest stop for the night, I managed to sneak out of the back and hooked a ride somewhere else. Eventually, I made it back to the tent cities, but no matter who I told about the people in the vans or the strange factories, nobody ever believed me. They all just thought I was crazy, something that's not that uncommon in the homeless population. They all thought I was making it up. They all thought I was trying to trick them. They all thought I had a mental illness, and eventually I wasn't welcome in a lot of places where the homeless people gather. I started trying to reintegrate into normal society after that. I went to drug rehab groups and got myself clean. I got a job. I got back to something adjacent to normal. But I never stopped thinking about the people in the black vans. What did they do with all those organs? More importantly, what did they do with all that meat? What was the purpose of the factory? What did they need all of that for? I don't know. I may never know. But it's a part of my old life that will keep me awake sometimes. If the people in the black vans offer you money for an unknown job, do yourself a favor and don't take it. The money ain't worth what you'll lose in the process.
Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's show. If you think you might like a little more spooky in your life, then please feel free to click on one of the videos we have up here. Maybe look at one of the playlists if you're trying to get caught up. I know, there's so many videos on the channel. There's so many series that are going at the same time. Sometimes you just need a little refresher course, and I gotta say, I always enjoy the views. If you're not subscribed, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit the bell so you don't miss anything. We upload a lot on this channel, so you won't want to miss a single story as they come out. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click on the Amazon link down there. There's quite a few books in my Amazon account. You can have a look, and if you'd like a signed copy, get up with me through email, and I'll be happy to work something out with you. Also, there's links to my Patreon, and you can become a member on the channel if you'd like your spooky a little bit early. Patrons and members on the $5 tier get their videos 12 hours early. That's in the morning as opposed to in the evening. Patrons at the $10 level also get a signed copy of my book anytime I write one. Speaking of my patrons, you should see them appearing right now. Just wanted to take a minute to say how much I appreciate all of you. Patrons, subscribers, however you give to the channel. I really appreciate everything you do. And it truly touches me that you have chosen to support the channel in this way. Well, that's enough for now. Till next time, Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.